Okay, thank you. As it was mentioned, my topic today is related to reception of audiovisual entrainment in contemporary esoteric currents. In this presentation, generally, I will talk about a particular case that is an adaptation of audiovisual entrainment. But also, we will try to understand how new technologies are adopted in contemporary Western esotericism, and how esotericism itself is changing through the influence of techniques. However, this problem itself should be considered as a part of a wider topic related to historical transformations of Western esotericism in general. Unlike followers of some esoteric teachings, for whom an answer to this question is pretty simple because they are sure that esotericism is a perennial tradition that is at least as ancient as the humanity itself, we as scholars, of course, are well aware that the question is not so easy to answer. In ancient cultures like, say, ancient Egypt, Assyria, or ancient Greece, there was no prominent difference between such domains of culture as religion, science, or esotericism. In late antiquity, the situation changed significantly when dogmatic religion based on faith had opposed itself to the domain of knowledge, which in fact included two types of knowledge, gnosis and episteme, or mystical and rational knowledge. And these two types were not separated throughout the Middle Ages, but instead they coexisted in rather amorphous form of medieval philosophy. Only the 18th century provided us with the separation of gnosis and episteme that resulted in construction of contemporary image of Western esotericism as opposite to modernity, science, rationality. At this point, knowledge has been divided into science and esotericism, and the last domain was stigmatized as a superstition. Therefore, at the beginning of the 19th century, three domains were finally constructed as separated fields: religion, science, and esotericism. However, they were not simply cultural domains, but instead they induced an emergence of three types of worldview: religious, scientific, and esoteric. Each of these three types now exists at several levels, from popular beliefs to philosophical conceptions. So, the interesting question here, as I put it, is why, in some cases, esoteric ideas are subtle enough to be called philosophy, while in other cases they descend to the level of popular beliefs? One of the answers for these questions, as I believe, in case of contemporary esoteric currents, is an influence of consumerism, which results in simplification of esoteric doctrines for purposes of selling them to wider audience that usually prefer easier explanations in conjunction with low prices and high promises. It is exactly what we can see in the case of audiovisual entrainment. But what is audiovisual entrainment itself? Generally, it is a medical technology that aims to induce by technological means specific patterns of brain activity and states of consciousness correlated with them. It usually assumes usage of a headset and special glasses or monitor in combination with neurofeedback to provoke a predictable response in brain activity. It is believed that a history of the medical usage of audiovisual entrainment begins in early 20th century, when a French psychologist, Pierre Janet, started to use a rotating wheel lit by a lamp positioned behind it for reduction in depression, tension, and hysteria of his patients. However, medical theory that aimed to explain an influence of audiovisual stimulation appeared only in 1929, when Hans Berger, the inventor of EEG, first demonstrated a record of brain activity and discovered the algorithms and their association with certain states of consciousness. However, Berger's results were considered doubtful until they had been confirmed after 5 years in 1934 by Adrian and Matthews, who discovered also that the alpha rhythm of the brain may be enhanced by visual stimulation of the same frequency. Then, in 1959, Chaitrand discovered a similar effect for auditory stimulation. Further discoveries in the field were related to works of Gray Walter. It was demonstrated in Walter's experiments that subjects who observed flicker flares with a frequency from 8 to 25 Hz, which simply means from 8 to 25 flares per second, with closed eyes, experienced bright illusions of spirals, vortexes, bursts, and luminous wheels. The effect itself was well known for centuries and was used for practice of divination at least as early as in the 16th century. But Walter's discovery connected it with contemporary research in neuroscience. Walter also discovered the delta brain waves correlated with a state of deep sleep and theta brain waves that are the most important in our case because they are correlated with drowsy or meditative states. These waves then become a matter of a great interest for neuroscientists because of their importance in medicine, for instance in cases of reduction of pain. It opens an era of study of meditation in medical research. According to following studies, it was demonstrated that audio-visual entrainment can provoke a dissociation similar to meditative state that leads to loss of somatic and cognitive awareness. And it was even demonstrated that audio-visual stimulation can make someone's meditation experience deeper. Another important landmark was 1933, when Oster published an article about special properties of binaural beats. Binaural beats is a sound illusion that occurs when on a right and a left ear serve per tone signals with a frequency difference of no more than 40 Hz. It creates an illusion of beats at a frequency equal to the frequency difference. The article published by Oster, combined with previous works in the field, led to an increase in research of acoustic stimulation in 1970s. Effectiveness of audio-visual entrainment in medical setting, it was demonstrated that is dependent on a bunch of factors, including parameters of a session in general, like its duration and the general environment. It is also dependent on visual parameters and audio parameters of the session. The most important problem related to medical usage of audio-visual entrainment is a correct choice of frequencies that are used, because research has demonstrated that the brain does not always provide a response on a frequency that is identical to a frequency of a stimulus itself. Therefore, an influence of particular audio-visual stimulus on a particular person can hardly be correctly predicted without a narrow feedback. So, to personalize sessions of audio-visual entrainment, in medical institutions, EEG is usually used together with audio and visual stimulation to provide a narrow feedback. However, organization of narrow feedback is expensive and, which is even more important, requires a special medical training. Therefore, a narrow feedback is not widely distributed outside of medical institutions. But on the other hand, audio-visual entrainment itself requires sufficiently cheap devices or can be performed by means of a personal computer. Because of this reason, such products have become widespread on esoteric market. Followers of contemporary esoteric doctrines adopted audio-visual entrainment in several manners. The first adaptation, that is also close enough to its medical origins, is called Mind Machine, which is a standalone device with a headset, glasses, and software for audio-visual entrainment. Generally, it can be described as an attempt to reproduce a medical technology outside of medical institution so that people without special training can use it. The history of mind machines can be traced back to late 1950s, when a device known as brainwave synchronizer was first tested. This device was nothing more than a lamp that flickered with specified frequency. That is, in this case, it was used only visual stimulation without any audio. In early 1960s, this apparatus appeared on esoteric market and thus started the history of commercial adaptation of audio-visual entrainment. Mind machines, in a strict sense of the word, emerged in 1970s. Particularly, in 1979, Denis Georges introduced a learning relaxation device, which significantly resembles contemporary mind machines and was described by its inventor as an eye mask having independently controlled left and right eyepieces and a peripheral light array in each eyepiece, an audio headset having independently controlled left and right earpieces, and a control panel. The most important difference between a mind machine and its medical prototypes is that a mind machine usually provides user with no neurofeedback. As a result, the device cannot be tuned individually. Once again, such simplification was performed because neurofeedback is usually provided by EEG device, which requires a participation of qualified specialists. Without EEG, the fact of proper influence of audio-visual entrainment cannot be verified. Therefore, operators usually rely on subjective experience rather than on accurate data. Nevertheless, from technical point of view, a mind machine seems to be a fair solution in spite of simplifications in issues with personalization. However, I should say, on the other hand, that from a marketing point of view, it is a complete disaster. It is a complete disaster because you should convince your prospective customer to buy a special device for something called audio-visual entrainment. And your customer, maybe he or she just doesn't know what it is audio-visual entrainment. And you try to convince him or her to buy some very expensive device to try this audio-visual entrainment. And of course, in situation of market, that simply doesn't work. So, nowadays, when personal computers have become a casual part of our everyday life, it is much cheaper to create a track that can be then used by playing on a standard PC. Usually, developers of these tracks use audio entrainment alone to make them compatible with the most common computer sets and audio players. The most popular type of such tracks is binaural beats meditations. One of the first persons who started to promote binaural beats on esoteric market was Robert Monroe, an author famous for his books about out-of-body experience. In 1994, he achieved a patent in which there was described a method of and apparatus for inducing desired states of consciousness. It is clear from the patent that Monroe thought about a device that should be very similar to simplified mind machine without glasses. But soon he abandoned the idea and concentrated on audio tracks for personal computers instead. The main reason for a change of the course was fast development of personal computers and audio players that made special device for audio stimulation simply unnecessary. Today, the Monroe Institute, created by Robert Monroe, sells under the Hemisync trademark sets of binaural beats for variety of purposes, from spiritual, like meditation or out-of-body experience, to entirely mundane, like treatment or even weight loss and attraction of money, like in this case here on slide. A set that should help you to develop your psychokinesis, with a spoon and a fork included. Note, they are included, so you can start your psychokinesis experiments right from the box, and no visit to any other shop needed in this case. According to the seller, training requires as little as an hour a week. The set will, quote, quickly take you into profound whole brain meditative states, end quote, which will provide you with the following abilities, quote, illuminate light bulbs with your own energy, bend spoons with minimal effort, influence computers, dice, and slot machines. The last one ability, I believe, is the most important one. Please mind the rhetoric here. We have had this rhetoric yesterday in case of the Kabbalah Center. This rhetoric is a very typical marketing rhetoric for selling courses or selling something with three main essence on easy, quick, and prominent results. That is something that people generally would like to buy. Binaural beats should be recorded in stereo format, and they should be used by listening them through a headset, because binaural beats require a playback of different frequencies for each ear. However, some binaural beats that you can find at Esoteric Market, or so-called binaural beats, are not binaural at all, because they are not in stereo but instead in mono format, and can be played through loudspeakers, say for meditation classes. At this point, we see that a technology that was at the first place related to scientific theory separates from it and starts to live its own life. The process here is in some regards similar to those described previously by Katerina Zora in the case of historical theories. When it comes to collective meditations with so-called binaural meditation tracks, participants really are not aware of the scientific meaning of such terms as binaural beats or with the body of research literature on this topic. The truth is, they are not even interested in it, and it is easy to understand because they came to meditation class, not to a class in sciences. So, instead, they use scientific terminology to legitimize their practice and make it more competitive in situation of esoteric market. It is especially obvious in the case of one of the most recent esoteric adaptations of the idea of audio-visual entrainment, that is, solfeggio frequencies. The term solfeggio frequencies appears for the first time in books of Leonard Horowitz, the most important of which is the Book of 528, published in 2011. The author develops the concept according to which conventional music frequencies are not correct and should be replaced with so-called ancient frequencies, which were presumably rediscovered by the author. These ancient solfeggio notes have assuming healing and other miraculous properties, like healing DNA or helping to release guilt and fear. Furthermore, Horowitz states that the real number of notes is 9 instead of 7. Further, these 9 notes form the perfect circle of sound, which is a registry trademark, and this perfect circle of sound, you can see it on a slide. Horowitz grounded his speculations about solfeggio frequencies on numerological correspondences and likewise sources. The most important of described frequencies is 528 Hz, importance of which Horowitz states in the following manner, quote, "A major part of our mission on this holy land, this sacred earth, is to create a venue for the science of creationism, featuring 528 Hz as central to the musical mathematical metrics of creation," end quote. As we can see, the idea was not grounded on a scientific understanding of the audiovisual entrainment. Although it refers to a variety of scientific concepts and terminology like DNA, atoms, frequencies, and so on. In one passage, for instance, the author explains the importance of water for esoteric practices in the following manner. H2O, it's a quote, H2O is a polarized molecule, meaning two adjacent H2Os must form a hexagonal array of atoms. The atoms vibrate in holy spiritual resonance using this sacred geometry, the triangulated elements in H2O, hydrogen and oxygen, end quote. Nevertheless, emergence of solfeggio frequencies, along with the existence of meditations with binaural beats, had led to the emergence of binaural beats with solfeggio frequencies at the carrier frequency, and at this point, solfeggio frequencies were combined with contemporary esoteric adaptations of audio-visual entrainment. Therefore, in case of solfeggio frequencies, we can see how medical technology finally transforms after a series of reinterpretations in the context of esoteric discourse. Solfeggio frequencies, as well as some of other above described adaptations, are very dubious from the medical point of view. Nevertheless, they prominently influenced transformations of contemporary esoteric currents and were included in the discourse of techno-magic, where they now happily coexist with a wide range of phenomena, including clothes and stickers for EMR protection, lucid dream machines, software with assumed magical powers, and so on. In a quote mentioned yesterday, Arthur Clarke once said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And an example of audiovisual entrainment demonstrates a complex interconnection between contemporary technology and esoteric ideas. On the one hand, audiovisual entrainment that in fact had come in science from divinatory practices of Western esotericism, just like hypnosis before, was then used for scientific studies of esoteric psychotechniques like meditation, and even for reproduction of some of their effects in experimental medical setting. Legitimization of the technology by academic research has drawn an attention of esoteric community, and some contemporary esoteric groups have even tried to build the technology into their esoteric practices in a proper manner on basis of scientific research, like in the case of mind machines. However, it is rather an exception than a common rule. In the context of an esoteric market and popular esotericism, the technology was adapted for mass consumption in accordance with logic of the market that led it to simplification, promises of quick and prominent results, and a loss of any scientific meaning, while it still appeals to scientific research as an instrument of its legitimization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stas. Please questions.